Okay, today we're going to do lesson 10 from module 5, which starts off a new bend, we'll say, for this module, where we're talking about area and versus we left off finding the volume. So the volume is what goes inside of a three-dimensional shape. The area is what fits inside a flat shape. So if this was my rectangle, and this was whatever the length is, and this is whatever the width is, the area is what is inside. So when we're thinking about finding area, one of the most common examples is finding like tiles on a floor. If we think about our classrooms have tiles, right? They're made up of little squares that together create the floor. And the way that this helps us is we can think about the area in terms of tiles and how many tiles can fit in one space. So if we had the problem 3 units times 2 units, and I wanted to find the area of this space, what that is saying, it's saying units. We know that when we use the word units, it means we don't have an actual measurement. Eventually we'll build up to actual measurements, but right now we're just going to call it units. But if I had a room that was 3 units by 2 units, and I wanted to know what the area of that room is, I can think of these as tiles. So I can think of 3 units is my length. So that means I have 3 units long and 2 units wide. And so then when I look at how many total tiles do I have, each one of these is worth 1 whole because there's 3 ones and then there's 2 ones. I can say, okay, well, I have 6 units. I can realistically do 3 times 2 to get 6. It's the awesome thing about working with finding the area of whole numbers. We can treat them as multiplication. Now, because we're big 5th graders, we need to think about how our areas are not always going to be whole numbers. Sometimes it's going to be fractions. So if instead of it being 3 units by 2 units, if it was 3 units by 2.5 units, this is going to change what we do. Now I can start by drawing that same picture. If it's 3 units long, that means I know it's going to be broken up into 3 columns, and 2.5 units tall. So here are my 2, just like we have above, but now I need to represent my half. So instead of drawing a whole box, I'm just going to draw like a little halvesy box. And that can be represented by my 1/2. So if I was going to think about these in terms of my tiles, we know that each one of these is worth 1 still. And then each of these small pieces is not worth 1. It's only worth 1/2. Because remember, this 2 is broken up into the 1 and the 1, and then this 1/2 is just its 1/2. So this room has 6 full tiles, and then it also has 3 half tiles. Well, we can see that if you have 2 1/2s, that together is going to come together as 1. And then we're left with 1/2 on its own. So when we add those together to find the volume, we get 7.5 units. So when we're finding the area, we have to think of it in terms of finding the whole part and then finding the fraction part as 2 separate pieces, and then we can combine them together via tiling. So my area is 7.5 units or 7.5 tiles. So this one is drawn for us already. So this is rectangle B, and looking at this picture, I can see that it is 4 units tall or wide, right? This was our width. And that's a whole because there's no fractional pieces. So I can fill this out as 4 units wide. And its length, we've been writing it on the bottom. This is kind of confusing why that's there. So we're going to go bloop, 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 bloop. Go clear that out. We're going to think about it as the length. They wrote it on the top here. They say it's worth 2 wholes and then 1/4 section is that smallest column. So the length is 2 and 1/4. We just combine that whole number and that fraction piece together. So our rectangle is 2 and 1/4 units long by 4 units wide. And then it wants us to figure out the area, how many units squared, because area is always square. How many units are in here? Well, you can treat it just the same. And they already kind of are doing this math for us here. We know that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 holes. And then there are 1/4 here, 1/4 here, 1/4 here, and 1/4 there. There are 4 copies of 1/4, which when you add all those together, you're going to get 1. So 8 plus 1 is 9. Our area of this rectangle is 9 units squared. Okay, rectangle C. 3/4 units long and 4 units wide. So let's draw it together. 3/4 units long. That's going to be a very skinny rectangle because that's going to be that dimension. So it's just going to be 3/4. We've been doing mixed numbers normally as our length, right? 2 and 1/4, or I guess whole numbers too. So this is our first, it can just still be a fraction, 3/4 and 4 units wide. So that means this dimension is going to be 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're saying that in each of these tiles, there's 4 of them, they're each 3/4. So we're finding 4 copies of 3/4. We can do that by repeated addition. We also can do that by multiplication. 4 over 1. This will give me 12/4, which gives me 3. Let's check that with repeated addition. I'll just break it apart on here. 3/4 plus 3/4 is going to give me 6/4. 3/4 plus 3/4 is going to give me 6/4. 6/4 plus 6/4 is going to give me 12/4. Same answer. Awesome. So our area is 3 units squared. So this is all about finding the area of a rectangular shape that has fractional side lengths. And we're using this tiling method just to make sense of what area is, and that area is made up of the space inside, and tiles help us with this. Now we're going to eventually start using just numbers, but I like using these tiles at the beginning to help us kind of get an idea. We're going to try one word problem, and I'll tell you right now this is a complicated one just in terms of steps. So let's read it out. Rachel made a mosaic from different color rectangular tiles. Now a mosaic is an art piece that's made up of lots of little pieces together. We're saying that 3 tiles, so she used 3 tiles that measured 3 1/2 by 3 inches. And then she used 6 tiles that measured 4 inches by 3 1/4 inches. And then they want us to find out the area of the whole mosaic. So we kind of have to approach this in 2 separate ways. We need to figure out the area of the first type of tiles, and then we need to find the area of the second type of tiles, and then we'll have to figure out how many we have of each of those. So let's do this one at a time. Let's do the first tile first. So it says 3 1/2 inches by 3 inches. So if this represents my tile, we're going to say 3. So 1, 2, 3, those are the holes. And then this is my half. I know it's not to size. We're going with it. Use your imagination. 3 1/2 inches by 3 inches. Okay, so each of these is 1. And then each of these is 1/2. So when I add all these together, my wholes are going to together be 9. And my halves are going to be 1.5, because I can put 2 together as 1. And this is still a half. So adding all of those up, I'm going to say that tile number 1 has an area of 10.5 inches squared. Okay, tile number 2. Tile number 2 says it's 4 inches by 3 1/4 inches. So here's my tile. 4 inches by 3 1/4. So I need 1, 2, 3, and then that's my 1/4. So each one of these is worth 1, and then each one of these is worth 1/4. And then I can just add. So my wholes, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, and then my 1/4, that's handy. There are 4 of them, so all together, that equals 1. So combining those two pieces together, we get 13 square inches. Now we have to go back and look at our problem, because the problem tells us that we have 3 of these number 1 tiles and 6 of these type 2 tiles. So this area that we found is for 1 tile, right? 1 tile. But I need multiples now. So I need to times this by 3, and I need to times this by 6. I'm going to do the whole number one first because that seems easiest. 13 times 6 gives me 78 square inches for the type 2 tiles. And for the type 1 tiles, 10 1/2 inches by 3. You can use the same multiplication strategies here. I'm going to use repeated addition because I know it's going to be 10.5 plus 10.5 plus 10.5, which is going to be 30. That equals 1 plus 1/2, so that's 31.5 square inches. So now I have my 2 pieces. I need to combine them together. 31.5 plus 78, 109 square inches is the total area. So I'm able to use the tiling method to help us figure out when you're multiplying a fraction times a whole number. And that's kind of our goal today, is finding the area of rectangles with whole by mixed and whole by fraction using tiling, right? Tiling, that idea where we're breaking it apart to represent individual pieces. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense today, and you're ready to try it on your own.